Welcome to Church History Insights and Questions. This is episode 9. It's part 2 of plural marriage. It's called a confession and an apology. So let's get into it. Part 1 was incomplete in lots of different ways, but one particular way stands out. As I mentioned in episode 8, when I joined the church in the early 70s, there was no talk, or at least in the circles that I moved, there was no talk of Joseph Smith being involved in plural marriage. It was all about Brigham Young's involvement. It wasn't until some 40 years later in the 2010s that I became aware that the church's position was that Joseph Smith introduced and practiced plural marriage. And then between 2013 and 2015 came the 4 gospel topic essays about plural marriage. And once I'd got my head around them, I assumed it was a settled deal. And my part 1 video, episode 8 in the Church History Insights and Questions series, was delivered on that basis. If you've not already seen that episode, part 1, episode 8, plural marriage, please drop back and have a look. It does follow the church's line. It sets out, as set out in the essays and in the Joseph Smith papers, and as set out by LDS Church scholarship. So it surprised me when I got a pushback comment from @Kate272 that Joseph Smith was not a polygamist. I went back and forth for a bit on this, seeking understanding of why that was so, and it drew me into a rather deep and twisting rabbit hole. That's me there, you can see, just before I went into it. I'm very grateful to @Kate272 for helping me to understand this and providing links to various YouTube videos that set out a view that is different from the church's stated position. So here we go with the confession. Excuse my naivety, but I did not know that there were LDS members who today disagreed with the church's stated position. This was news to me. If I had known, I would have raised the issue in episode 8. So I wanted to come back on this part 2 video and apologize for not having appreciated that not everyone believes that it is a settled matter. There is apparently, from some church members, as there had been for over 100 years from the reorganized church, vehement opposition to the church's position that Joseph Smith introduced and practiced plural marriage. Reminiscent of views expressed when I joined the church, their belief is that Brigham Young was the culprit. I should have known this. I'm not a professional historian, as you all well know, but I should have done more detailed research and picked up on this before now. So I apologize. I apologize to any who saw that first episode and were disappointed, to put it mildly, that I hadn't acknowledged that there were different views to those that were being expressed by the church. So we'll get into this in a little bit in a moment here, but two things to clarify. Firstly, and the first one is, I totally love to get comments and feedback of all kind, including pushback. I wouldn't want you to think that I did not appreciate that. The converse is true. I did appreciate it very much, and please keep those comments coming. The second thing I want to just clarify is that it doesn't mean that I agree with the position adopted by some church members on this issue. But I do want to set the record straight and make clear that not everyone agrees with the church position on this. And I want to look at some of the points of contention, which we'll have a look at in a moment. Not that I'm suggesting that mine is in any way educated, but I wanted to just put in Aristotle's 2,300-year-old statement. He says it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. So let's look first at who are the main people arguing that Joseph Smith was a monogamist and not a polygamist. Who are in the against corner? Well, this is by no means a comprehensive list of people. In the sort of brief period of research that I conducted and following the links that I had received, I can see that there are 4 or 5 sort of main people who are leading the charge, to put it that way, in this matter. Jeremy Hoop, his YouTube channel is called Still Mormon. He has 4,750 subscribers, or he did when I last looked, maybe more now. He started in July of last year, that'd be 2024, and the latest of his 8 videos, released in March 2025, has 13,000 views. You can jump onto Jeremy's very well produced channel, and you can find out a lot more about his arguments and so forth. The next would be Michelle Stone. She's been going for quite a bit longer, since February 2022. Her YouTube channel is called 132 Problems. This is a reference to section 132 in the Doctrine and Covenants. Clearly Michelle believes that there are problems with that particular section. Revisiting Mormon Polygamy. She has 119,000 subscribers, and she's been going a bit longer, so she's got 210 videos, and she's typically getting between 5,000 to 25,000 views, and a few are getting much more than that, 40,000 to 55,000 views. Next would be Kimberly Brown. I don't think, or I haven't been able to find a YouTube channel for Kimberly, so I'm not sure that she has one. But she is the great-great-great-granddaughter of William Clayton. Who's William Clayton? Well, William Clayton was one of Joseph Smith's scribes. And why is he important? Well, we'll talk about him a little bit more later, but he provides one of the very few contemporary records that give information about Joseph Smith's practice of polygamy. Now, Kimberly she believes that the Clayton diaries and journals, having been rewritten, is the claim, that they are actually an unreliable source. Why is this significant? Well, it's significant because the church's church history scholars and others have relied upon the veracity of William Clayton's journals quite a bit. Karen Hyatt, her YouTube channel is called Woe Unto You Scribes, The Hidden History of Polygamy. She has 619 subscribers and 2 videos. The second, most recent, was in December 2024, and that had 24,000 views. And then finally, there's Whitney Horning. I'm not sure whether she does have a YouTube channel, but she is an author, and she wrote in 2022 a book entitled Joseph Smith Revealed, A Faithful Telling, Exploring an Alternative Polygamy Narrative. So those, I think, are the main people who are leading the charge against the idea that Joseph was a polygamist. Let's look at the other side of the coin. Those on the other side of the ring, those who are for, who are the main people arguing that Joseph Smith was a polygamist and not a monogamist. Well, this is, again, by no means a comprehensive list. We could probably add hundreds more onto this list, but these are some of the ones that I'm aware of and have looked at. Mark Tensmeyer, and he's an attorney and an independent historian, and he has written a chapter in a book called Secret Covenants, New Insights on Early Mormon Polygamy, which is edited by Cheryl Bruno. And it's quite a big chapter. I think there's more than like 60 pages in it. And it's quite a comprehensive look at the historical verification of Joseph Smith's polygamy. So Mark Tensmeyer is interesting because he, unlike me, he was clearly aware of all of those who were in the against corner, and he's aware of the positions that they have adopted and that are putting forward, and he attempts in his chapter to address those contentions, and so it's interesting from that point of view. Others, Fawn Brodie, back in the sort of 1940s, 1950s, author historian. Todd Compton, author historian. The church relies quite heavily on Todd Compton's work. Laurel Thatcher Urick, author historian. Richard Lyman Bushman, author of Joseph Smith, Rough Stone Rolling. Again, the church quotes Richard Bushman quite a bit. Dan Vogel, another author historian. Cheryl Bruno, who we've mentioned above, is an author, and Brittany Chapman Nash. Let's Talk About Polygamy, 2021. Brian Hales is quite a well-known figure because he and his wife Laura did a lot of research into Joseph Smith's plural wives, and I think their website is called Joseph Smith Polygamy, and it is quite heavily quoted in the Gospel Topics essays and in other places by church historians and by church leaders. And so Brian Hales is regarded as a bit of an expert. Now those in the opposing corner are rather dismissive of Brian Hales. They don't think he's a particularly sort of good researcher, if you might use that term. But so that's all part of the argument, and so we're just sort of setting the record out here a little bit. And then this last one is a bit tongue-in-cheek. I do not know whether all historians employed by the church are totally in favour of the view expressed by the church. I would imagine they are. I have not read any contradictory passages or articles on the subject by church-employed historians. As I say, that's not a comprehensive list. I think that could be a bigger list. And then seeing both sides, a couple of people. Don Bradley is interesting because he is a Joseph Smith researcher and historian, and he in fact worked with Brian Hales, or was employed by Brian Hales, to look at all of the documents relating to Joseph Smith's plural marriage. He left the church, and I don't know why. If you were about to ask me that, I don't know. He then returned to the church, and he believes that Joseph Smith's motivations for engaging in plural marriage were not based on sexual driven desires. But he's kind of a little bit seeing both sides of the story there. Cheryl Bruno is making both mainstream Mormon historian and polygamy skeptics upset. She's managing to upset both sides. On the one hand, she says that polygamy skeptics are making good points about original documents, questioning the traditional narrative about Joseph Smith's polygamy. On the other hand, she upsets the skeptics because she believes Joseph Smith did practice polygamy. So let's look into this. What are the main contentions? What are the main points of disagreement between the two sides? And all of these points are coming from the against side. So these are coming from the people who Jeremy Hoop and Michelle Stone, Karen Hyatt and others, who do not believe that Joseph Smith was a polygamist, and they believe that he was a monogamist. So let's look at these. Joseph Smith consistently opposed polygamy in his public statements. And I think this is a true point. I think that it's very difficult to find any reference that Joseph Smith may have made in favour of polygamy while he was alive. So all of his public statements appear to be in opposition to polygamy, and they would often include an assertion that anybody found practicing polygamy, or sometimes referred to as spiritual wifery, would be brought up in front of a high council membership council. What we call them today. They used to be called disciplinary courts or disciplinary councils, and I think before that they were called courts. Joseph Smith denied ever having taught or practiced plural marriage, and I think again this is probably fairly accurate. He is on record denying teaching or practicing plural marriage. Of course, the other side of the coin, those who the church authorities and church historians who are teaching and putting forward the position that Joseph Smith did practice plural marriage, their reasoning against these first 2 points would I think be that Joseph Smith swore everybody to silence and to sort of secrecy on the subject, and he did publicly deny anything to do with plural marriage, but the church's position is that he was practicing it and was teaching it privately and secretly. After the death of Joseph and Hiram, Brigham Young and his scribes made numerous revisions to original journals and notes. This does seem to have been a practice that did take place. Church authorities don't consider this to be a particular problem or a particular reason to question the orthodox narrative that they are promoting. Personally, I would think that this is actually an area where church historians could maybe provide a little bit more clarity as to why they don't think that is a problem. I think that would be helpful in explaining their position more clearly. Fourth one down there, no contemporary first-hand accounts of any of the women alleged to be Joseph's plural wives. Again, I think that this is a fairly accurate statement, but again it goes back to the orthodox or official narrative that Joseph Smith swore all of the participants to secrecy and to silence, and so you can understand why there would be no contemporary records of these wives being involved in plural marriage. Suspicions are raised regarding the veracity of the sworn testimonies of Joseph's plural wives and others, which were given decades later. So these two points are slightly related. So although there are no contemporary records from any wives claiming to have been sealed to Joseph Smith, there are quite a few later testimonies and later articles and later written statements, books published, but these did not come out until many decades later. And this again, from the church official narrative, this would be aligned with the idea that the whole practice was not to be made known to the public or available to only a select few members of the church in Nauvoo at the time. Second of these contentions at the top here, section 132 contradicts teachings found in other scriptures, including the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith's revision of the Bible. And so this is a contention of those who believe that Joseph Smith was a monogamist and not involved in polygamy in any way. And yes, if you look at the biblical teachings and most of the Book of Mormon teachings, you're not going to find explicit teachings supporting the practice of plural marriage or celestial marriage. And so on the surface of it, section 132 could indeed be thought to be somewhat contradictory to the teachings that were given elsewhere, as well as the teachings given by Joseph and Hiram and other leaders at the time. Section 132 contains textual inconsistencies and contradictions. For example, at the very beginning, it refers to Isaac. It has a list of Old Testament prophets who participated in plural marriage, and it suggests that these were under the direction of God, and it includes Isaac on the list. There is no evidence, though, in the Bible that Isaac had any plural wives, and in fact there is no really evidence in the Bible that this was a command from God. It not necessarily explicitly stated in that way, perhaps. And there are other textual inconsistencies and contradictions that those in the monogamist camp would put forward. The middle one, the provenance of section 132, is questioned because William Clayton's witness credibility is questioned. So we mentioned William Clayton earlier, and he was the one who produced the Revelation, which is now section 132 in the Doctrine and Covenants. He wrote it as it was dictated to him, or his claim is that he wrote it as it was dictated to him by Joseph Smith. Hiram Smith was present when it was being done. And so, as I mentioned previously, church history scholars and church leaders do put quite a bit of weight behind William Clayton's journal, and on the opposing side, William Clayton's journal is questioned for its credibility. Again, I think it would be helpful if church history scholars maybe could respond to that in some way and give some explanation or some context or some background as to why they are not troubled, are not worried about William Clayton's journals, and to give a little bit more information on that might be helpful. Emma Smith always denied that Joseph practiced plural marriage. That, I think, is a contested statement in itself, because there are a number of statements from a number of people who claim that Emma Smith, whilst not always a positive advocate for plural marriage, that there were times when she A, acknowledged it, and B, encouraged it. And I think this particular comment probably goes more to the interview that Emma gave to her son, Joseph Smith III. This would have been in the late 1860s. I can't remember the exact date, but and there she did deny that her husband Joseph and Joseph III's father was involved in plural marriage. So yes, that kind of is an added sort of problem that is put forward by those who believe that Joseph Smith was a monogamist. The last one here on this page is the veracity of Brian Hale's research and the conclusions he draws are questioned. I mentioned earlier that Brian Hale's is relied upon heavily by the church narrative, and he is questioned on the other side by those who do not believe that Joseph Smith was a polygamist. And the last three: Joseph had no children with anyone but Emma, yet he fathered 9 with her. So the thinking here is that if Joseph Smith had been a polygamist and had 30 to 40 wives, depending on the number and depending on which number everybody goes with. I mentioned in the previous episode that I had looked at 25 lists compiled, names of Joseph Smith's alleged plural wives. The smallest list had 3 names on it, and the largest list had 78 names on it. So the church is kind of going with a total of about 35, maybe 35 to 40. They're not saying specifically, but it's kind of around that sort of figure. And so the question here is, if Joseph Smith was involved with 35 women, and some of those relationships were of a sexual nature, then why are there no offspring? That's kind of an open question there. Then the church's claim in the Joseph Smith papers that Joseph Smith and others distinguished between celestial plural marriage and spiritual wifery is questioned. So yes, there is a sort of a comment in the Joseph Smith papers that that spiritual wifery was something that was practiced by others, had nothing to do with Joseph Smith, and that Joseph Smith distinguished between spiritual wifery and celestial plural marriage. And those on the opposing side who believe Joseph Smith was a monogamist, they claim that there is ample evidence from the wives who wrote later in life about being a wife in Nauvoo to Joseph Smith, that some of these wives refer to spiritual wifery, and they say that that is the term which was used in the Nauvoo days to be applied to those who were wives of Joseph Smith. And Heber C. Kimball, Brigham Young, and others also referred to spiritual wifery as being a term that was deployed in Nauvoo in the 1840s. And then lastly here, the main contention, one of the main contentions is that Brigham Young first introduced plural marriage while on his mission in England. And so we'll have a brief look at that in a moment. But that concludes the main contentions. I'm not again suggesting that these are the only contentions. You may very well be able to find others on the websites of those who are contending that Joseph Smith was a monogamist. But those are the main ones that I picked out, 13 of them. As I say, I'm not saying it's a comprehensive list. I want to come back on one of those. It says, suspicions are raised regarding the veracity of the sworn testimonies of Joseph's plural wives and others given decades later. So that brings us to this slide, which is a bit about witness statements. And so the reference in that question is to affidavits that were compiled by Joseph F. Smith in the late 1860s, 1869, a little bit into 1870. And then 20 or so years later, the other affidavits or witness statements that were introduced into the Temple Lot case, which was held in Missouri in between 1890 and 1894. And the Temple Lot case, very briefly, is that a parcel of land in Independence, Missouri, was contested over. The two churches which were contesting it were the Temple Lot or the Church of Christ, Hedrikites, or the Temple Lot Church, as they were referred to, who had ownership and were situated on this parcel of land. And the other contender was the RLDS, the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who were contending that they were the rightful owners of this parcel of land, and so it went to court. Now, where does the Utah Church or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints come into this? Well, the church at the time wanted to support the case of the Church of Christ Hedrikites, Temple Lot, who were already in situ. And the reason they wanted to do that is because part of the contention from the RLDS Church was that they were the true successors to Joseph Smith because they were not practicing plural marriage, and they never had, and nor had Joseph Smith. That was their contention. And so this became a key point for all three churches that were involved, although the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Utah Church, was not directly involved. It was involved in a supporting role to the Church of Christ Hedrachites Temple Lot. And so part of that process was that Joseph F. Smith, then a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, he was tasked with identifying women who were purportedly wives to Joseph Smith, and meeting with them, talking to them, and then getting them to swear an affidavit to the effect that they were sealed to Joseph Smith, or they knew somebody who was sealed to Joseph Smith, lots of different things. So this list here, apologies that it's really very small, but this list is a list of all of the notary publics or probate judges or justices of the peace, and those are the three main ones. These are a list of all of these who these people swore in front of these 18 different judicial characters or formal statement receivers and notarizers. And it shows the numbers there that each one did. The top one is James Jack. Let me just read this. Notary public. And this, all of these, and there were 38 affidavits that he witnessed, put a stamp and a seal on the statements. Elias Smith, probate judge, 11 affidavits, and then the list goes on and on. And so there were in total 78 affidavits that were signed by individuals who certified under oath that they were either sealed to Joseph Smith in Nauvoo, or they witnessed a sealing, or they witnessed. In fact, I think we've got it here on this next slide. Let me just go on to that. These are some of the things which they're witnessing. So wives stating in their affidavits that they were sealed to Joseph Smith in Nauvoo, 20 of those. Wives stating in their affidavits that they were sealed to Hiram Smith in Nauvoo, 2 of those. Others stating in their affidavits that they witnessed plural marriage sealings performed by Joseph Smith or by Hiram Smith, 13 of those. Others stating in their affidavits that they witnessed plural marriage sealings in Nauvoo by others, 10 of those. Others stating in their affidavits that they heard directly about plural marriage in Nauvoo, either from Joseph Smith or Hiram Smith, 17 of those. Stating that they heard Hiram Smith read the Revelation, section 132, at a High Council meeting, and the Revelation was given in 12th of July, 1843, and it was read in a High Council meeting in August of 1843. And there are 6 men who swore that they were there and they heard it read. And that's the reason that is kind of significant but also contentious, is that the monogamists believe that section 132, which, for those of you familiar with it, contains the revelation on celestial marriage and also on plural marriage. They contend that was either only partially written at that time, and it was only the bit about celestial marriage, or or that all of it was not written at that time, but came many years later, and was actually the product of Brigham Young and others. So it's interesting that 6 of the High Council swore on their affidavit that they were there when they heard Hiram Smith actually read it to them. Got clerks stating in their affidavits that they wrote or copied the revelation too. So one of those is William Clayton, who we've mentioned. Others stating in their affidavits that they heard about Joseph Smith's plural marriage involvement in Nauvoo from third parties, 8 of those. So that's things. So the reason I put that there is because I understand and acknowledge the different viewpoint that Joseph Smith was not a polygamist, or did not introduce plural marriage or celestial marriage. He may have introduced celestial marriage, but he didn't introduce plural marriage. I understand that viewpoint, but I think this is pretty difficult ground for folks to get over, because you've got 78 different people, 78 individuals who are willing to swear on oath that they were either there, or that they were sealed to Joseph, or they saw sealings practiced, performed, or whatever, or that they were in the High Council meeting, etc., as we've gone through. I think that's difficult. It's difficult to get over that. If you are conspiratorially minded and you believe that Joseph F. Smith either forced or persuaded these people to make false statements or anything like that, I think that's a tough one to get over, because you've got to get 78 people who will be willing to swear on oath, or really to lie on oath, and that's a pretty difficult thing to get over, I think. The other thing I just wanted to quickly touch on was Brigham Young. It was suggested that Brigham Young introduced plural marriage while he was. Yes, so I just wanted to look at that in a little bit more detail. There's a speech that he made on June the 23rd, 1874. So this is many years after the event. He was in England, would it be 1841? Something like that. So we're way after the event took place. But this is his recollection, this is his thought. He says this, quote, "While we were in England, I think the Lord manifested to me by visions and his Spirit things that I did not then understand. I never opened my mouth to any persons concerning them until I returned to Nauvoo. Joseph had never mentioned this. There had never been a thought of it in the church that I knew anything about at that time. But I had this for myself, and I kept it to myself. And when I returned home and Joseph revealed these things to me, I then understood the reflections that were upon my mind while in England. But this was not until after I had told him what I understood. I saw that he was after something by his conversation, leading my mind along, and others, to see how we could bear this. This was in 1841. The revelation was given in 1843, but the doctrine was revealed before this. And when I told Joseph what I understood, which was right in front of my house in the street as he was shaking hands and leaving me, he turned round and looked me in the eyes, and says he, 'Brother Brigham, are you speaking what you understand? Are you in earnest?' Says I speak just as the Spirit manifests to me." Says he, "God bless you. The Lord has opened your mind." And he turned and went off. Close quote. So I'm not sure that this is particularly, revelatory on the particular issue as to whether Brigham introduced plural marriage in England, or introduced it before any kind of involvement in it from Joseph. But this is Brigham's recollection of what took place when he got back in Nauvoo, when he got back from his mission in England. He'd had this intimation. They're clearly talking about plural marriage and celestial marriage, and he'd had this intimation. But from what he's saying here, he kept it to himself, and he didn't act upon it, etc., etc. So it's just a bit of additional information on that particular point of contention that has been raised. It brings us to the end of our session here. So thank you for watching this part 2 on plural marriage. It did contain a confession. The confession was that I didn't know about this group of church members who do not fall in line with the official church narrative on this particular subject. I didn't know about that, and I apologize for not knowing, and I apologize for not acknowledging in my first part that was the case. So I wanted to put the record straight. I think this is going to be an issue that is likely to rumble on for some time. I don't know how large the proportion of church members is that believes that Joseph was a monogamist and not a polygamist. I don't know. I sense it's not very huge. I've been around for over 50 years in the church, and I hadn't come across it, and I haven't come across anyone in the United Kingdom who believes that. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I hadn't come across them, and so it might be an American thing. It might be localized in sort of parts of Utah, or I'm not really sure about that. I don't know. Don't quote me. But I think it's going to be an issue that will probably need some degree of further attention and clarification, further information to come forward. I would recommend that chapter that Mark Tensmeyer wrote. It does cover a lot of these points. I'm not saying it probably covers all of them, but it covers a lot of them, and it kind of puts the church's official narrative into context and in a bit more light. Anyway, but thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, please like it. If you want to comment, please comment. And if you would like to subscribe, please subscribe. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much. Bye.